Federal agents arrived at a Beverly Hills hotel shortly after midnight on January 30th. Their target was a journalist covering the Grammy Awards. By sunrise, Don Lemon would be in federal custody, charged in connection with an alleged disruption of worship at a Minnesota church, an event he entered 2 weeks earlier with a camera to document. I'm Claire Morgan. This is the Mirror Moment. Here's what makes this story unusual. A federal magistrate judge previously declined to advance the initial filing against Lemon, citing insufficient evidence at that stage. Then a second judge declined to issue an arrest warrant. So, Attorney General Pam Bondi sought a grand jury indictment. By Thursday, January 29th, prosecutors obtained one. By Friday morning, Lemon was arrested. The question dividing public reaction is simple, but the answer depends heavily on interpretation. Was Don Lemon acting as a journalist, gathering information? Or did he cross a legal line into participation in conduct that interfered with religious worship? Let me show you how the same event is being reported as two very different realities. Because what happened in that St. Paul church on January 18th is not only a story about protest and press coverage, it has become a mirror. And what people see depends on where they begin. Let's start with what we can state with confidence, separated from commentary. On January 18th, a group of protesters entered City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota during a Sunday service. The church is affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. One of its pastors, David Easterwood, also serves as the acting director of the St. Paul Field Office for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The protesters said they were demonstrating in response to ICE-related enforcement activity. According to federal officials, immigration operations in the Twin Cities region have increased in recent months, with thousands of arrests reported. The protest also followed two fatal incidents involving federal agents in Minnesota that drew public attention and anger. Those deaths have been referenced by demonstrators as part of the broader context for their actions. Inside the church, protesters chanted slogans including "ICE out" and "Justice for Renee Good."
ICE out! ICE out! ICE out! ICE out! ICE out!
The service was interrupted and ended early. Don Lemon, formerly of CNN and now an independent journalist, was present inside the church. He live-streamed the event and conducted interviews with both churchgoers and protesters. In his video, Lemon stated, "We're not part of the activists, but we're here just reporting on them." According to the federal indictment, Lemon attended a briefing held by protest organizers the day before. Prosecutors allege he described the upcoming protest as involving civil disobedience and did not publicly identify the church location until his live coverage began. On January 29th, a federal grand jury in Minnesota returned an indictment against Lemon and 8 co-defendants. The charges include conspiracy to interfere with the free exercise of religious worship and injuring, intimidating, interfering with individuals exercising that right at a place of worship. Lemon was arrested by federal agents at approximately midnight at a Beverly Hills hotel, where he was covering events related to the Grammy Awards. 3 other individuals were also arrested on Friday, including Georgia Fort, Traherne Jean Cruz, and Jamiel Lydell Lundy, alongside other defendants named in the indictment. All defendants were released on personal recognizance bonds. Lemon appeared in federal court in Los Angeles and was granted permission to travel internationally while the case is pending. Those are the core events as publicly reported. What happened, when it happened, and what the government alleges. Now let's look at how this story is being framed. If you're watching MSNBC, reading the New York Times, or following CNN's coverage, the emphasis is clear. This case raises serious questions about press freedom and the First Amendment. CNN issued a statement saying, "Lemon's arrest raises profoundly concerning questions about press freedom and the First Amendment." The network noted that earlier judicial review did not find sufficient grounds to proceed at that time. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass called the arrest shocking and alarming, stating that Lemon appeared to have been arrested for following and documenting a protest inside a church. She described it as a serious challenge to constitutionally protected press activity. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer argued that the arrest could send a chilling message to journalists, suggesting it may discourage aggressive reporting on controversial government actions. The Committee to Protect Journalists condemned the arrest. Catherine Jacobson said the case should concern Americans broadly, arguing that law enforcement resources may be targeting reporters rather than prioritizing accountability in other disputed events. Minnesota Chief United States District Judge Patrick Schultz wrote that Lemon and his producer were not themselves protesters, and that available evidence did not show criminal conduct by them at that stage of review. The Washington Post reviewed Lemon's video footage and reported that it shows him with activists before the protest and then inside the church interviewing both sides. The footage does not show him chanting or physically obstructing worshipers. Legal experts have raised concerns that the federal laws cited were not intended to apply to reporters gathering news. Some have described the charges as unusually aggressive in the context of press documentation. Gabe Rotman of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press said the administration's use of the FACE Act in this context is rare, noting that cases involving journalists documenting protests are typically handled, if at all, through lower-level state trespass enforcement. Lemon's attorney, Abby Lowell, argued that the prosecution represents an unprecedented attempt to criminalize news gathering and distract from other controversies facing the administration. In this framing, the story is about whether government power is being used to deter accountability journalism. The early judicial reluctance to approve charges is presented as evidence that the legal theory may be strained. But if you turn to Fox News, Newsmax, or conservative outlets, the emphasis shifts. The headline here is not primarily about journalism. It is about protecting religious worship from disruption. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the arrests on social media, describing the incident as a coordinated disruption of a church service. Fox News described Lemon as having live-streamed activists who entered the church during worship. The network highlighted Lemon's comments about protest rights as evidence that he may have been sympathetic to the demonstrators' cause. Harmeet Dillon, overseeing the Civil Rights Division, argued that places of worship are protected spaces under federal law and that the First Amendment does not immunize conduct that interferes with religious exercise. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett argued in an opinion piece that Lemon's proximity to organizers and his conduct could support the government's claim that he moved beyond neutral observation. According to conservative reporting based on affidavits, some churchgoers told law enforcement they felt unsafe, reported blocked movement within the sanctuary, and expressed fear during the disruption. Conservative media has focused heavily on allegations that Lemon attended a planning meeting and withheld the church location until the live stream began. In this framing, those details are treated as potential evidence of coordination rather than mere reporting access. The White House's official social media account also posted a mocking message referencing Lemon's arrest. In this narrative, the case is about whether a journalist can claim press status while embedding closely with activists in a disruptive action. The argument is that press identification does not exempt someone from criminal liability if prosecutors can prove participation in a conspiracy. So here is where the country finds itself. Same event, same footage, same indictment. Two sharply different interpretations. On one side, Lemon's arrest is viewed as a dangerous escalation, an attempt to blur journalism into criminal conduct and intimidate reporters documenting state power. On the other side, Lemon's arrest is viewed as necessary enforcement, an effort to protect religious worship from disruption and hold accountable anyone who allegedly helped enable it. And here's what makes this a true mirror moment. Both sides are drawing opposite conclusions from overlapping evidence. The allegation that Lemon attended a planning meeting? Left frame. Journalists routinely meet with groups they cover. That is reporting. Right frame. Prosecutors argue that planning meetings can indicate coordination, not observation. The allegation that he did not name the church location until the live stream? Left frame. Journalists sometimes withhold details until reporting begins. Right frame. Critics argue that concealment may suggest strategic intent. The fact that he interviewed both sides? Left frame, that is standard journalism. Right frame. Opponents argue that tone and proximity may reflect alignment. Even the legal process is interpreted differently. Two judges initially declined to approve warrants or charges at early stages, but a grand jury later returned an indictment. Left frame. Early judicial skepticism suggests the case may be politically driven. Right frame. The indictment suggests prosecutors convinced a grand jury that probable cause exists. There is also broader context. The protest occurred amid heightened anger over federal immigration enforcement and disputed fatal incidents involving federal agents. Left frame, Lemon was documenting a community in crisis. Right frame, critics argue that no grievance justifies disrupting worship. That brings us to the law itself. The Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, known as FACE. Passed in 1994, the law prohibits force, threats, or physical obstruction interfering with people seeking reproductive health services or exercising religious freedom at places of worship. The Trump administration previously criticized FACE Act enforcement against anti-abortion activists and issued guidance limiting its use to severe circumstances. Now, the same law is being applied in a church-related protest case. Left frame. Critics argue this reflects selective enforcement. Right frame. Supporters argue the law was always meant to protect worship as well. So, what actually happened? Did Don Lemon commit journalism or a crime? The answer is the legal system has not resolved that question yet. What exists now are competing claims, video footage, witness accounts, prosecutorial allegations of coordination, Lemon's own statements denying participation, and an indictment that will be tested in court. Until a trial examines evidence under cross-examination, the country is left with interpretation. Don Lemon said, after his release,
"The First Amendment of the Constitution protects that work for me and for countless of other journalists. I will not be silenced."
Attorney General Pam Bondi said,
"You have the right to worship freely and safely. And if I haven't been clear already, if you violate that sacred right, we are coming after you."
both statements invoke fundamental rights. Both claim to defend democracy, and they are aimed at the same collision point, where protest, worship, and press freedom intersect. So ask yourself this. When you first heard about this story, before the details, what was your instinct? Did you think this threatens journalists? Or did you think this protects worshipers? Because that instinct often determines which reality feels most convincing. This is what a mirror moment looks like. It is not simply about lies. It is about interpretation. Two groups looking at the same event and reaching different conclusions about rights, boundaries, and accountability. I'm not here to tell you which side is right, but I am here to tell you this. If you are not at least curious about what the other side believes it is defending, you are not seeing the full picture. The trial is scheduled for February 9th in Minnesota. Lemon has said he will plead not guilty. Until then, this case will continue to function as a national mirror. One event, competing truths, and a country struggling to agree on where reporting ends and participation begins. If this episode made you think, or better yet, made you uncomfortable, hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me which part of this story you think is being misrepresented, because I guarantee half of you will say one thing and half will say another. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into the stories where the framing matters as much as the facts. And share this with someone who sees this case completely differently than you do. That's where the real conversation starts. And the question isn't only what happened in that church. The question is what you see when you look at it. I'm Claire Morgan. This is The Mirror Moment.